Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this very important event. My name is Elizabeth Couts. I'm the mayor of the city of Burnsville. And I know that there are a lot of folks that are still interested in what's going on, but I think this is the time to come and we will begin the storytelling and the convening. One of the things that I'm excited about and also want to thank Climate Generation for choosing Burnsville is because, if you don't know, Burnsville has been an early adopter to this whole space about our environment and being good stewards of our planet. In 2005, I was one of the first mayors within the Conference of Mayors. We were the group, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, who signed a climate protection agreement when our government did not sign the Kyoto Protocol. And then when I became the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors in 2009, this was one of my top agenda items. So the suit you see me wearing tonight has been all over the world on the issue of climate protection and protecting the planet. And so when I was asked to address you and to welcome you to Burnsville, I thought it was most appropriate that I did it and wore this suit in my own city because it is about the environment. We in Burnsville are passionate about taking care of our environment. We're passionate of making sure that we are good stewards of our planet. We are passionate about making sure that this environment and its assets and natural resources that we have and we enjoy will be passed on to future generations. That's why we are passionate, and because we were early adopters. And when I brought the idea to our staff and to the council, I want you to know that in Burnsville we're very conservative. So we didn't talk about climate protection. We talked about the environment. We talked about being good stewards of our planet and our natural resources. And it took us 2 years through a governance process to go through and understand from subject matter experts what we needed to do. And in 2009, we adopted our sustainability plan. You will hear from Sue Bass later on this evening. Sue, where are you? Sue manages our sustainability plan. And in the city of Burnsville, everything falls around our sustainability plan. So whether it's land use or infrastructure, Sue will manage the discussion around all of that and that it meets all of the critical criterias. You see, the state of Minnesota set in place their greenhouse gas goals that should be met by 2015, and it was supposed to be at 15% below 15% by 2015 from the baseline that was there. Burnsville far exceeded that already. We are at 18% below the greenhouse gas emissions for the state of Minnesota. And we have far exceeded all of the steps for the Green City steps in the state of Minnesota. Now they have to think up more steps for us. But we don't wait for them. We want to make sure that we are good stewards of our environment. We want to make sure that our children and grandchildren will have a healthy planet to live in. But also in Burnsville, we care about our water. I want you to know, and I don't know whether the folks from DNR or the Minnesota Pollution Control will talk about the strategies that we took in Burnsville that, with regard to water, that helped to recharge the Jordan Aquifer. And the data comes out of the DNR and the MPCA, not us. But the baselines are there, and we have all the data. If you ever want to see it, we're proud to show you all of that. It's on our website. Right, Sue? Yes, it's on the website, so you can see it. But thank you for really caring about our environment. Thank you for caring about our planet. Thank you for being here. Before I leave you, I want to recognize Senator Jim Carlson. Where are you, Senator? Here he is. Senator Carlson, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule at the legislature. I know you're coming down to the wire. Get it done. Get it done. You know, don't leave things on the table. Just get it done. So thank you so much for being here. And I don't know if there are any other elected officials in the audience. Mr. Phil Stern, he was a council member in Rosemount. Thank you for coming. So everyone, enjoy this evening. I look forward to hearing your stories. And next week, I will be in Washington talking to leaders from across the world and across our nation on climate. So thank you for being here. It's important that we preserve and maintain and be good stewards of our natural resources. And when we started our sustainability plan, the one thing I said to everyone was that we can make a difference one light bulb at a time. Change your light bulbs. Make a difference. Thank you for coming. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Mayor Kautz. It means a lot to have you here this evening and to hear why you think Climate Minnesota is important to the Burnsville community. So I know you have to head out, but thanks for being with us. I'm Kristen Poppleton, and I'm the Director of Education for Climate Generation, a Will Steger legacy. You may have known us formerly as the Will Steger Foundation, but our name just changed a few weeks ago. Our name may have changed, but our mission stays the same: to educate and empower individuals to engage in climate change solutions, and that's why we're here tonight. And we're so excited to have our very first public event as Climate Generation here in Burnsville. So thanks for helping us celebrate in that way. We join the City of Burnsville, the District 191 School District, and Community Education District 191 Environmental Committee in convening you all here this evening. And we're also, we're joined earlier by Burnsville's own sustainability man. I don't know if you caught him. He flew through here pretty quick. And I understand that an episode of Sustainability Man is being filmed here that will air later on this month. Before I go any further, I need to acknowledge where the support for this event comes from. The Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, RAR Corporation, Lowell Designs, and the McKnight Foundation all have made this evening possible. I also need to acknowledge Climate Generation staff and board who are here with us this evening. You can raise your hand if you'd like. I know there's a lot of you, so I can't recognize you all. This event would not have been possible without your hard work, and especially would not have been possible without the hard work of Josna Harris, our education coordinator, who you will have the pleasure of meeting quite shortly. Sue Bast and Marty Dahl from the City of Burnsville, and Donley Johnson and Taylor Hayes from District 191 have been invaluable partners in planning this evening. We're doing 11 of these events around the state of Minnesota, and without community partners like you guys, we would not be able to pull this off. So thank you so much for helping us make this evening happen. And then finally, many thanks to the volunteers that probably many of you met as you came in, and our resource fair participants for helping us start this evening off. And then finally, thank you to all of you for showing up this evening. The sun came out again, so I'm glad that you chose to still want to come indoors. I understand that it's I Love Burnsville week, and I'm really happy to see that you all chose to show your love for Burnsville by showing up this evening to show your commitment to climate change solutions. So, what is Climate Minnesota? Climate Minnesota is about bringing together communities like yours to learn together, to feel together, and to engage in solutions together. And I'm sure that all of you everyone in this room would agree that climate change is one of the most daunting challenges of our time. It's complicated, it's politically charged, and for a long time it's really seemed very removed from our lives here as Minnesotans. But as you will hear this evening from Dr. Abraham, climate change is here, and we're seeing the consequences in Minnesota. At our melted outdoor hockey rinks, in our changing northern forests, in our flooded farm fields, and in our electric bills for summer cooling. Fortunately, though, there are things that we can do. And these stories you're going to hear this evening from Anna Birch, from Andy Holdsworth, and from Mohammed Jiwa. Your neighbors that believe that solutions are possible and who are working towards them. And then finally, if you were hoping you were just going to get to sit back and enjoy the show this evening, I'm sorry, we're going to put you all to work too. We've identified 5 climate change solutions that are offered by resources here in your community of Burnsville. And you'll be able to choose one that you want to learn a little bit more about. And these solutions will range from energy efficiency to native plantings to developing your own climate story and sharing it. You'll find that stories are the thread that runs through this evening. Stories that highlight fears we may all have about what the future holds, and stories that are built on hope and perseverance as we face the future. We're privileged to share this evening with you, to hear your stories, and to work together towards climate change solutions. So, as we move through this evening, we'll be asking you some questions, and I hope you didn't all just sit down on that card that was on your seat. We're going to ask you to interact with this a few times. And so the card and the pencil that was there, if you could pull it out right now.
Can I ask you something?
Yes, ma'am.
This isn't just for Burnsville, right?
Burnsville, Egan Savage, Apple Valley, yes. Well, I'm sorry, I was following up with the mayor, but yes, for the area, and thank you actually for pointing that out. It's for those in the community around us. Thank you. So, if you have your card in front of you, we're going to begin this evening's story with words, like stories often do. And our first question to you this evening is to think in your head, in one word, what do you value most about your community? Whether it be Burnsville or Apple Valley or Savage or Egan, what do you value most about your community? And go ahead and write it down. And if you can write it dark, that'd be great. And once you've written it, I want you to hold it up high above your head so I know that you're done. And then I want you to shout that word out to the world. Cool. And remember that word. We're going to come back to it later on this evening. So now it's with great pleasure that I get to introduce our special guest, Dr. John Abraham. Dr. Abraham is a professor of thermal sciences at the University of St. Thomas, where his research is in climate monitoring and renewable energy generation for the developing world. In November 2010, Dr. Abraham and 2 of his colleagues launched the Climate Science Rapid Response Team to provide rapid, high-quality scientific information to the media and government decision makers. The intention of this group is to enable scientists to share their work directly with the general public. I couldn't think of a better person to share with us this evening a look at climate change and this community. Thank you. Come on up.
Well, I appreciate that. As I saw the lineup, I think you guys sort of tricked me into coming here because I'm a professor of engineering and we're not known for being very eloquent. And I have to go after a professional public speaker and before engaging charismatic young people. So I am sandwiched in no person's land. But I'm going to give it a go anyway. So I study climate change. I study what's called climate monitoring. We measure the climate. We want to know what's happening now so we can figure out what's going to happen in the future. And I'm going to give you a brief rundown of what do we know and why do we know it. So science papers come out all the time, and every few years a major publication comes out. It's called the IPCC report. I was an expert reviewer on it. It came out in 2013. Here are some of the statements, the summary statements from that organization. Warming is unequivocal. Each of the last 3 years, 3 decades, has been hotter than the last 1,400 years. Some extreme weather events are increasing. Greenland and Antarctica are losing mass, decreased snow cover, sea levels are rising, etc. The poles are warming, and oceans becoming acidic. So those are things we're observing. Those are facts. And I want to talk about why do we connect these to what humans are doing with the atmosphere, and what are some of the unknown questions that we have out there. But I like to start out with this image. So this is an image that speaks really powerfully to me. I mean, I'm a scientist, but I'm also a human. I mean, that sounds sort of strange. I'm a human. I've got family and feelings, and I care about the world. And the reason why I love this photo is it's a young child, and the continent that is facing, I got to make sure it's the right slide. I'm talking here. It's the continent that's facing you is Africa. And the color of the skin is the color of an African. And they're holding this globe. This speaks powerfully to me about justice and about the inequity of adverse reactions to climate change around the world. Frankly, that continent's going to suffer more than Canada. And it's going to suffer more than the United States. On the other hand, Canada and the United States are disproportionately responsible for the problem. So we want to think about this as a connected worldwide problem. And more recently, actually in 2010, this photo took on significant impact to me because the middle finger of the left hand of the child ends on Uganda, and that's the country that I adopted a young girl from. So one of my daughters is from that country, and I gathered this photo before that adoption, but it's more powerful now. So why do we know? Why do scientists know humans are causing climate change? It's not just that the planet's warming. It's that it's warming in the right way. It has the fingerprints of human emission. Let me give you an example. Some of the fingerprints are listed here, but I can give you a simple example. Some people say the sun's getting hotter. That's what's causing the earth to warm. People are nodding their head. Yeah, they've heard that one. If the sun were causing the earth to warm, would you expect days to be warming more or nights when no sun shines? Days, right. We're observing the opposite. We're observing nights to warm faster than days. If the sun were causing the warming, we would expect the entire atmosphere from the top to the bottom all to be warming. We're not observing that. Actually, the top of the atmosphere is actually getting colder because we're holding heat down. So it's not just that things are happening. They're happening in the right way. They have the fingerprints of greenhouse gases. So what is this greenhouse gas thing? Well, light goes from the sun to the earth, passes through the atmosphere. The atmosphere is transparent to visible light. That's why we can see during the day. The earth sends out its own energy. It's called infrared energy, but the atmosphere is opaque to that. So the atmosphere traps that energy and sends it back. That's the greenhouse effect in a nutshell. So one question we want to know is, are we changing the number or amount of gases that cause this? Well, the curve on the screen here is one of the most famous graphs in all of science. It's called the Keeling curve. And this guy, Charles David Keeling, started measuring this carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in 1957. He was crazy about it. He actually missed the birth of his son because he was out taking measurements. Ralph Keeling, who I met in California a few years ago. But this curve shows how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere. And there is no doubt that carbon dioxide is going up, and we just passed 400 parts per million for the first time in April. So carbon dioxide is going up as well as other greenhouse gases. So this graph shows 3 greenhouse gases. On the left is 2,000 years ago. On the right is today. So those are the 3 most important greenhouse gases. There is no doubt that they began to rise with the onset of the Industrial Revolution. So where is it from? Well, electricity is the most important emission source for greenhouse gases. In the United States, coal is about 42% of our electricity, and it's about 1/3 of our CO2 emissions. That exceeds the continent of Africa. I mean, it's incredible the amount of emissions we have just from our electrical use. 1 kilowatt hour of your electrical bill amounts to 2 pounds of CO2, which is 18 cubic feet of space. So if you take your electrical bill at the end of the month, every kilowatt hour, that's how it's measured, multiply that by 18, and that's how much cubic feet of space you have of carbon dioxide. The next big area is transportation. Burning a gallon of gas in a combustion engine releases 20 pounds of CO2. Now, that sounds like a lot, but when you realize the weight of a pound of gasoline is only 7 pounds, it's really shocking. The weight of carbon dioxide coming out your tailpipe is 3 times heavier than the liquid gas you put in your car. Every gallon is 173 cubic feet of space. So we know, and look, we're emitting greenhouse gases right now with the lights on. We drove here in our daily lives. The reason why I bring these up is if we're going to do smart action to reduce our emissions, we had better know the major sources of emissions so we can be smart about solving this problem. All right, so what? Our temperature's going up. If temperatures aren't responding, who cares? This is an updated graph from NASA. NASA is one of the 4 main groups that measure global temperatures. Every black dot is a year. 2014 was the hottest year on record. Broke all the records. And that goes back to 1880. That's when we started to get good enough records to get a global average. Here are the hottest 10 years in ranked order. Back to 1880. This is your top 10. So far, 2015 is beating 2014. So there is clearly a trend with, and let's add an 11th one there, 2012. Now, what some people will do is they'll pick a hot year and they'll pick a cold year and they'll say, look, global warming stopped. Just be mindful of anyone who says global warming either started or stopped in a certain year. We like to look at long-term trends. Some years can be hot, some years are cold. We like to look at the long-term trends. But we can do better than this. We can actually go back further in time. And I got to tell you, every time I get to these plots, my wife says, every graph you put on the slide cuts half of the people out. Half of the people go to sleep. I promise we don't have many graphs yet, but this is such a powerful one. This goes back 400,000 years. The left-hand side is 400,000 years ago. The right-hand side is today. There are 2 lines there. One is greenhouse gas levels, and one is temperature. Oh, my gosh. Look at how well they're connected, how tightly they're connected. When you go back into deep history, when greenhouse gases go up, temperatures go up. When temperatures go up, greenhouse gases go up. And when they go down, they both go down together. We call those handcuffed. When one moves, the other moves. What would make us think that this tight connection between these 2 things would all of a sudden magically stop in the year 2014? We have a lot of history which shows that greenhouse gases and temperatures go together. John, how do we know that? There weren't people with thermometers. There wasn't NASA with satellites 400,000 years ago. Well, we use what are called proxies. Proxies are signals from nature. Let me give you an example of a proxy. How many people like to camp? All right. So, young lady, you're sitting in the front row, so I got to pick on you. Let's say you go camping. This is Taylor Hayes, right? Taylor Hayes? Okay. Taylor's camping up in the Boundary Waters, and for some reason you brought a shovel. And when everyone else is roasting marshmallows and drinking beer, you're digging. And Taylor digs down into the ground and she discovers crocodile skeletons and palm fronds. She would conclude, what about the past climate? It was warmer, right. And we use other signals from nature. We look at the pollen in dirt. We look at the animal shells in ocean sediments. We look at tree rings. We look at ice cores. This is probably the most well-known natural proxy, but we can look at ice cores. It's a photograph of someone digging an ice core. They're about 6 inches in diameter, and they can go down 2 miles. And when you dig an ice core, you get annual rings. So there's a photograph at the bottom, and if you're near the front, you've got good eyes, you can see these white, dark bands. Those are annual rings. So you could actually count back in time. They're a time machine. And you can go back 100,000 years, 200,000 years. You can go back almost 1 million years. And if you pick a year and you melt that ice, you will release trapped air bubbles which contain the atmosphere when that ice was frozen. And you can also tell the temperature when that ice was formed. And that is how we get an image like this. We use natural proxies. They're not as good as thermometers, but they still tell a pretty compelling story. All right, so all of this has been happening in the past. What's going to happen in the future? Well, that's us through the year 2000. That is 2100. We are already starting to feel the effects of climate change in terms of extreme weather, more severe drought, more heavier precipitation. Can you imagine what it's going to be like in 2100? That was, this is the map of the United States in 2012. We remember that was a hot year. Every red state was the warmest on record. The only state that was not much above average was Washington, and I actually had someone tell me that 2012 wasn't that hot because Washington was just above normal. This was the drought monitor taken in July of 2012. This drought cost our country about $35 billion in lost agricultural productivity. But climate change isn't just about hotter and drier. It's about more wild swings. We call it weather whiplash. We go from one extreme to the other. So this was in late July. Early 2013 looked like this. This is a precipitation map in the United States. Illinois, Indiana, parts of Wisconsin and Iowa and Minnesota went from drought to flooding at the drop of a hat. It was really unbelievable. But the water spigot shut off in California. California is black and brown. That's the deepest drought that you can get on this map. And that drought in California has continued. Here is the drought you can actually go to the U.S. Drought Monitor. Every Thursday they update their graphs. And this is as of April 28th this year. California is under the most severe drought in 1,200 years. I'm going to skip this stuff about jet streams because that's pretty deep into to weather. But we want to acknowledge the difference between weather and climate. As our weather fluctuations become bigger, we're going to go from one extreme to the other more rapidly and more violently. You can't look out your window and tell anything about climate change. You can look out your window and tell something about local weather. This is actually a global map taken April 29th last year. And this map shows hot and cold regions around the planet. If you confuse weather with climate, any red or orange area is warmer than usual. Any blue area is colder than usual. If you confuse weather with climate, anyone in Minnesota would say climate change has stopped, but people in Greenland and Siberia would say it's on. So we want to be very careful as we talk about climate change. Climate change is really long-term things, and it's manifested in weather, but it's not proven by weather. What else are we seeing? This is an image showing the Arctic ice cap after the summer melt in 1980. It was the equivalent of the United States minus Arizona. That's how much ice we lost through 2005. That's 2007, and that was what we lost I think it was 2011. And we're on track right now to have the lowest ice extent, so we're going to even break this record. If you look at ice each year, this is the National Snow and Ice Data Center, it's bumpy. Some years there's a little more ice, some years there's a little less ice, but we like to look at the long-term trend, and the long-term trend is clearly downwards. We've lost about 60% of the Arctic ice at the end of the summer melt period. That looks like a lake. Well, it is. I guess it is a lake. I don't know what the definition of a lake is. But in the background, if you've got really good eyes, you can see an ice sheet. And that is actually a melt pond on top of Greenland. It's a motorboat traveling around a melt pond on the Greenland ice sheet. We can also go to the southern part of the globe. This is Antarctica. And there's a call out of the Larsen B ice shelf. And these are a series of images that were taken over about a month and a half. That ice shelf was the size of Rhode Island. It had been around for more than 10,000 years. It had collapsed in a month and a half. This shocked the climate community. And there's an overlay of the collapsed ice shelf and Rhode Island. We've also lost the Wilkins ice shelf, and we've lost a lot of glaciers. We're losing, 96% of glaciers are losing mass each year. These are before and after pictures of the McCarty Glacier. The camera was in the same location, taken about 100 years ago and 10 years ago. Before and after pictures of two other glaciers, and so on. So we see this kind of evidence all around the world. Before and after pictures of some alpine glaciers and Portage Glacier in Alaska. So we can see the signals in the ice. We can see it in the North Pole, the South Pole, Greenland, and in glaciers on top of mountains. Why do we care about this stuff? Well, we care because it impacts people's lives. This is a map of Asia, and it's color contoured by elevation with a close-up on Bangladesh. Much of Bangladesh is within a few feet of sea level. Scientists expect about a meter of sea level rise by 2100. That's a little over 3 feet. 20 million people in Bangladesh live within a meter of sea level rise. 150 million worldwide. So let's think about that as a geopolitical problem. What if you are India and you have 20 million climate refugees in your neighboring country? What kind of risks and threats would that pose to you? But it's not just Bangladesh. This is a photograph of parts of the United States that will be covered with a meter. That is 3 meters, and that's 6 meters. Once you get to a couple meters, Miami's gone. Can this really happen? I mean, is this science fiction? Well, it turns out Greenland itself has 23 feet of sea level trapped in its ice. Just Greenland. The west part of Antarctica, which is the unstable part, has another 17. Those are the two we're really worried about. Put that together, that's 40 feet of sea level rise. Will it happen next year? No. Will it all happen by 2100? No. Some of it will, though. And the things about these large ice sheets is once they start to go, you can't stop them. So you get committed to these types of sea level rise. If all of Antarctica were to melt, you'd be talking about 270 feet. Some of the other things, and I get so depressed when I get to this slide because it's this doom and gloom, but I promise you there are going to be solutions. Here are some of the other things. Lower crop yields. We're already seeing this as an example in California this year and in the breadbasket of the United States in 2012. Ocean acidification. This is my biggest worry. This is something most people aren't focused on for climate change, but basically we're reverse carbonating. No, we are carbonating the ocean. If you take a soda and you shake it up and pop the top, you get that fizz. That's carbon dioxide coming out of the soda. Well, we're actually putting carbon dioxide into the soda, and we've changed the pH. We've increased the number of what are called hydrogen ions by 30%. The reason why we care about that is if you are an animal that makes a calcium carbonate shell, like most of the animals at the base of the food chain, it's harder to form and keep your shell. So this is a food chain issue. Redistribution of water. The general rule of thumb is the areas that are currently wet will become wetter, like the eastern third of the U.S. is becoming wetter. The areas that are currently dry will become drier, like the western third. And areas like Minnesota in the middle, we will have about the same amount of rain, but it will come in heavier downbursts. Increase of extreme events. Hurricanes, the general consensus is there'll be fewer but more powerful hurricanes. Invasive species, flora migration, and extinction. So what do? I mean, how do we wrap our head around this, and how do we take action? Well, if we do nothing, emissions are going to go up. They're going to continue to go up. But we don't need a silver bullet to solve this problem like cold fusion or some kind of alien fairy dust. What we need is silver buckshot. A bunch of little things that make common sense, you add them together, they can solve this problem. We can solve this problem today with today's technology. Anyone who says we're still waiting for the engineers to solve, I am an engineer actually. So anyone who says we're still waiting for you to solve the problem, no. We've basically got the solutions in place. We're waiting for the will to take action. What can you do? You're going to hear a lot today about what you can do at the local level. And there are things that you can do in a larger scale level. We had the mayor talk to us today. If you talk to an elected official, if they get a call or two about a topic, it's a couple cranks. If they get 5 calls about a topic, it's a groundswell. Communicating to elected officials that this matters to you. Talking to your friends, your family. Let them know that it matters to you, and then take your own personal actions in your life. And cities and regions that are taking action are thriving. Burnsville is a great city to live in, even though it's exceeding its targets. British Columbia in Canada has a carbon pricing scheme, and their economy is growing faster than the country as a whole. So you can do these things without sacrificing economic growth. Change is possible. I love this picture. It's a rusty oil well in the foreground and beautiful wind turbines in the background. So I've got 2 more slides. On this slide, why come here? I mean, I come here because I get to meet nice people and participate in this, but I've got some kids at home. This is Olivia, the redhead. She wants to be a vet. Loves to read. She loves horses. This is my wild child, Lily. She actually swallowed a quarter on Saturday. Fortunately, she told me right away, but that's her personality. They are going to ask me 1 or 2 questions when I get older. They're going to say, Dad, you knew. What'd you do about it? Or they're going to say, how did your generation have the uncommon courage to preserve this beautiful earth for us? And I want desperately those 2 girls to ask me that second question. And this is my third reason. This is my daughter Avery in her home country, Uganda. This is a photo taken in her orphanage, and now she is happy and I hope nearing sleep tonight in Minneapolis. But her country is already feeling the effects. And for a country that relies on subsistence farming, it's a big deal. So I think I've got 1 more slide. What to take away? I mean, there's been a lot of data, a lot of graphs, a lot of me talking. Here are 4 things that I want you to walk away with. 1, we know. The first studies on climate change were published in the 1800s. The first prediction of human-induced climate change was 1896. This isn't rocket science. This is settled science. We know what's happening. Fortunately, this is a problem we can solve. We can solve it today with today's technology. You're going to hear stories of how you can enact this in your everyday life, but this is a solvable problem. If we're smart, we can not only solve the environment problem, but we can create jobs. We can diversify our energy supply. We can improve our national security. Sometimes I go down through Windham and Worthington, Minnesota, and if you look out, it's wind turbines as far as the eye can see, farmers being paid thousands of dollars every year for those turbines to be on their property. We can revitalize our economy here in Minnesota. I would rather pay a farmer in Worthington for my electricity than have to defend oil routes in the Persian Gulf. This is a no-brainer. Finally, some people say that it is too expensive to do anything about it. Well, doing nothing is a choice with tremendous economic consequences. The drought of 2012 cost us $35 billion. The year before that, there was a drought in Texas, which cost 600,000 heads of cattle, their lives, $6 billion in Texas alone. Superstorm Sandy, $65 billion. The drought in California today, even in Minnesota, the flooding in Duluth, 150 million, something like that. Doing nothing is a choice that has tremendous economic consequences. It is cheaper to take action to mitigate than to spend money later trying to adapt. And that's the takeaway message. And I don't know if there's time for, I think we're good. I'll hang around for a little bit. I do have an early flight tomorrow, so I can't hang around too much, but it's been a tremendous pleasure. Please come up to me if you have questions, but it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak to you tonight. And fortunately, we get away from me and we get to charismatic solution makers. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, John, for sharing the facts about what we know about climate change and for painting the picture of the global and local impacts that we're seeing now. And as a result, I anticipate that many of the words that we wrote down earlier about what we value most and that we shared with each other may be impacted. My name is Josna Harris, and I'm the Education Coordinator at Climate Generation, a Will Steger legacy. And given all that we've heard so far today, we want to take a moment to acknowledge how you might be feeling. So we're asking you to answer the following question and then share it with your neighbor. In light of what you have now learned, how does that threaten what you value most about your community? So this is not on your card. You'll want to just turn to your neighbor and share. thank you for sharing with each other. So we're asking this question because we recognize that before we can talk about solutions to climate change, we need to recognize our fears. And so we wanted to take an opportunity to do that. Personally, when I think about climate change, I think about my children. I think about what's at stake and what we have to lose. But I also feel hopeful. When I think about, I was born in Minnesota, and my children will grow up knowing a very different Minnesota than the one that I grew up with. But when I think about, right now we're in a very exciting time, one of the most exciting times for scientific and social innovations, and that keeps me hopeful. And last year, right here in the Burnsville Egan Savage School District, I was partnered as a Minnesota Green Corps member, energy conservation member, and together with the operations department, we launched a multi-pronged energy conservation campaign focused on inspiring behavioral changes. And we did that through competitions, contests, and through innovative programming. And as a result, we directly engaged over 6,000 students, employees, and community members. And we also produced an excess of $55,000 in avoided energy costs for over the course of 1 year. But while these energy conservation impacts were significant, for me, it was the student empowerment that left the greatest impact. I was inspired by the words of student Fernando Vasquez, who was a member of the Burnsville High School Green Team last year. And he said, "We cannot succeed in improving our environment without educating our current generation. We don't know what the future will look like, but we hope that we can work to make it the best that it can be." And Fernando's words stuck with me. So while climate change can feel daunting, we must be willing to face our fears and challenge ourselves to be moved. And I really believe that we as a generation, that means everybody alive today, are really the first ones who have experienced climate change. And so I think that we really have a great responsibility to respond to it. And I don't know about you, but when I think about my future grandchildren, and I look back, when they look back on history and they think about where we are at this moment in time, and they ask me, when did you first know about this dilemma, and what did you choose to do about it? I want to be able to say to them with certainty that I did everything that I could with what I was given. And that's why I'm so proud to be coordinating with Climate Generation, 12 of these Climate Minnesota convenings throughout the state, each one taking a very local approach. And here in Burnsville, I've been able to connect with community members like yourselves to find out how people have experienced the impacts that John described, but also to find out about current solutions that are underway. So today we'll hear from 3 of those community members and their stories of solutions through our storytelling panel. So I would like to introduce Taylor Hayes, who is currently leading sustainability efforts here in School District 191. And Taylor will be introducing our storytelling panel. Please welcome Taylor Hayes.
All right, thank you, Josna, for that introduction. And as Josna said, I'm Taylor Hayes, and I'm the Green Schools Liaison for the district. In light of Dr. Abraham's talk, I'm going to share some solutions that I've been engaged with right here in Burnsville. First, a little background for you. At ISD 191, we had a couple of very successful years of Minnesota Green Corps members who worked on waste prevention and energy conservation in the district. After those 2 years, ISD 191 determined that it was really important work that was being done, and they created a full-time permanent position, the Green Schools Liaison, and that is in the capacity that I join you here tonight. We work hard at ISD 191 to come up with sustainability solutions that keep our district community resilient, environmentally conscious, and healthy. And as a byproduct, these solutions are also working to address climate change. We have 191 Environmental Committee that meets monthly to share resources and to brainstorm ways to bring environmental issues into focus for our students. We send out monthly newsletters to staff called Sustainability Notes that highlights district stories and successes. Stories include students spending the morning cleaning up trash in their schoolyard, and students getting active by going to the Capitol to meet Governor Mark Dayton and urge him to prioritize clean energy in Minnesota. For the past 2 years, ISD 191 has engaged in a district-wide competition called the Battle of the Buildings, started by Josna Harris. Buildings battle it out to determine who can make the most positive environmental changes. The intent is to create awareness of environmental issues such as energy conservation and waste prevention. We hope that this competition will become a long-standing tradition, creating awareness and passion amongst our students for environmental sustainability. Our newsletters and updates can all be found online at our Go Green website. And if any of these kinds of solutions interest you, we've got a booth right back there that you can sign up for more updates. We have 3 storytellers here with us this evening. And as I call your name, you can feel free to come on up to the panel. Anna Birch, a 9th grade student at Nicollet Junior High. Andy Holdsworth with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. And Mohammed Jiwa with the Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. These 3 are going to share their climate stories with us, why they care about climate change, and what they have been doing to make a real tangible difference in our Burnsville community. With that, we'll welcome Anna Birch. Anna is a 9th grade student at Nicollet Junior High in Burnsville. Last year, Anna created a PSA, or public service announcement, on energy conservation entitled "It's Up to Us." Her video received first place in the middle school division in the ISD 191 District PSA video contest entitled "Value Your Power." Anna then went on to win the Climate Generation, a Will Steger Legacy, and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency video contest, Youth Voices of Change. Please welcome Anna Birch.
A little over a year ago, flyers for the Value Your Power video contest were handed out in school. I noticed that many kids either threw their flyers away or crammed them into their folders, likely to be forgotten. This inspired me to submit a video for 2 reasons. The first being, maybe I could actually win if no one else would try. But more importantly, if that happened, maybe I could begin to normalize the idea of teens speaking out about world issues, which in this case was energy conservation. I had a million points I wanted to make in my 60 seconds of video footage, but I decided to focus on what I believe to be the root of the issue. People lack hope that there's anything they can do to create significant positive change, and this belief destroys the motivation to try. In my video, I accredited people who, in their time, overcame seemingly impossible challenges and created a ripple of positivity that is still felt by all of us today. I also pointed out, however, that things can change for the worse, and they have before. An example being the hundreds of animals that have gone extinct as a result of various human errors, poaching, polluting and destroying natural habitats, etc. These negative events could have been prevented had they not been neglected by the majority of the population. I believe in order to stop such negligence from happening in the future, it must no longer be comfortable. The reality can't keep being swept under the rug, and each of us must take accountability for what is happening. It is fair to say that getting to this frame of mind is easier said than done. It is easy to feel powerless next to 7 billion other people. But the most important thing I got out of contributing to this contest was learning just how connected we all are to one another, and that even as individuals, we are definitely not powerless. For those of you who have not heard of 7 degrees of separation, it is the idea that we are all, at most, 7 people away from knowing anyone in the world. Though this concept may not actually be provable, it definitely contains an element of truth, and it puts our relationships with others in perspective. During the contest, there was a week-long public voting period. Over this week, I reached out to basically everyone I knew. What I was not expecting was for many of those people to go promote my video on their own, thus creating my own special ripple of positivity. I watched ecstatic as my views on YouTube climbed past 150. I did eventually win the contest due to a majority vote. Following that event, I was invited again to compete at a regional level. And after that, I was invited here, reaching more people than I could have ever imagined when I started out with a garbage bag set and a light bulb box. Since these experiences, my eyes have shifted to the truth of things. We are all connected with the earth and to each other, similar to a chain. It is our job to communicate and keep the chain from breaking, because if it does, we will all experience the fallout. Franklin D. Roosevelt said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." If I could speak on a huge intercom to the whole world, I would say, do not be made still by the idea that you can't make a difference. Things are not solid. Reality is not immovable. We as humans are very easily influenced, and when our perspectives change, so does the world.
Thank you, Anna. That was great. Our next storyteller is Andy Holdsworth. Andy is a conservation scientist with 20 years of natural resource conservation experience in state government, nonprofits, and academia. He received his PhD in conservation biology from the University of Minnesota. Since then, he has spent the last 9 years working at the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources Office of Policy and Planning. As a founding staff member of the agency's Climate and Renewable Energy Steering Team and the Climate Change Adaptation Team, he has worked 5 years to advance climate change adaptation at the DNR. Let's please welcome Andy Holdsworth.
Thanks, Taylor. I am going to talk about my personal story and get a little bit into interagency strategy. So I first saw the 2 words climate change when I was in high school. There was this book on my family's coffee table, and it was the first book for the general audience written on climate change in 1989. Frankly, the title, The End of Nature, was incredibly disturbing. So disturbing, I don't think I read much of the book, but I wondered, what would that mean, the end of nature? I thought, what does this mean for the Crum Creek behind my house, the trout stream that brought me so much joy in my childhood and a few fish dinners? What would it mean for that? Just 2 years later, I was in college, and John could appreciate this, and we had to evaluate the evidence in 1991 for climate change. And my environmental science professor put all the papers, the major papers on climate science, in a single box. And we had to review all of those and come up with our own personal assessment of the evidence of climate change. Now, thankfully, I'm not a college student now, because the professor would probably take us to a room full of boxes of the evidence on climate change that you saw so well portrayed by John. Of course, now what was amazing to experience in my life is that we are experiencing what I wrote about in 1991, the increased frequency of rainfall events, temperature-driven fish kills, and a serious decline in the moose population in Minnesota. Now, there's multiple factors being studied on that one, but heat stress is clearly a major driver. Finally, I could never have imagined when I was in college that my son would write a sign calling us to save the moose in preparation for his trip to a climate rally in Washington, D.C. So part of my experience of climate change is facing the change. That is the reality of it. We are committed to a certain amount of change. That's frightening and overwhelming. John showed that big, bright orange and red, line shooting up. And so what do we do about this? So I'm just speaking really about climate change adaptation, something that I've gotten really involved in at my time at the Department of Natural Resources, because we need to do all that we can to reduce our emissions, but we also need to take actions that help our human and our natural systems prepare for and adjust to this change. And a key part of thinking about climate change adaptation is what is vulnerable to the climate change impacts that we see. What is vulnerable in our communities, whether that's the people here, our infrastructure, or our natural resources. So it's taking a hard look at that. What does it mean for us locally? And the cool thing about climate change adaptation, it is very local. It's something that we can make a difference about in terms of what our experience is going into the future as climate changes. So I'm going to tell a fish story to put on my DNR hat, and it's got two characters, Cisco and Pete, to give you a little example of adaptation and vulnerability thinking at work. So Cisco is really a canary in the coal mine for climate change impacts. It's a cold water fish species, widespread in Minnesota. It needs cool, deep, oxygen-rich lakes, and it's also a really important food source for walleye and other game fish. And this is Pete Jacobson, a colleague of mine at the Minnesota DNR, who has grown up to be a really superb fisheries research biologist. But he's also been someone who has stepped up as a professional and said, what do these climate change impacts mean for what I'm responsible for, our cold water fisheries? Because in this hot summer of 2006, there were some significant fish kills that Pete and his colleagues noticed, including these fish kills of Cisco. Now, they've been tracking Cisco numbers for the last 35 years, and there's been an over 40% decline since 1970 in Cisco. So they could just sit back and say, okay, wow, Cisco are really sensitive and vulnerable to climate change. The temperatures are warming in the atmosphere, in the air, and in our waters. But what can we do about that? And so they looked at all 648 lakes where Cisco occur. Those are many more dots than you see here, but generally in the northern half of the state. And they did a lot of sophisticated modeling and analysis and selected 238 of the deepest, clearest lakes that would be able to sustain Cisco as the climate warms. And so they realized that if we focus our efforts on these lakes, we can actually hold on to Cisco in this state. Now, it's not going to be nearly as many lakes as they are in now, but at least we are focusing our efforts on doing the watershed protection to protect Cisco in those lakes. And that comes down to protecting really natural vegetation and making sure that we maintain high water quality through best management practices. So I call on us to, like Pete and his colleagues, to really face the change. What does this mean for in their case, our cold water fisheries? But here tonight, what does climate change mean for our communities, and how can we work together to build stronger, more resilient communities in the face of this climate change? Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Our final storyteller tonight, rounding out our panel, is Mohammed Jiwa. Mohammed is a student at the University of Minnesota and an intern with Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. He will be starting as the Muslim Outreach Coordinator after Memorial Day. His work is supported with a grant from the Institute for the Environment at the University of Minnesota. Mohammed is currently creating awareness in environmental stewardship through engaging the Islamic community in opportunities to reduce carbon use in Islamic community centers. This summer, he will be conducting climate conversations in Islamic community centers around the region. Let's give a warm welcome to Mohammed Jiwa.
Hi, once again, my name is Mohammed Jiwa. And as that picture on the top states there, can't really read it very clearly, but I'm here to kind of create the future. My goal, essentially, is to change the paradigm from what we see on the left over there, where we're ego-driven, where it's all just about us as human beings, to more what's on the left down there, where we're more eco-conscious. So some of the things I like to do during the summertime, kind of like that ringtail lemur, is meditate, work out outside, just be outdoors, play sports, go canoeing, things like that. Wintertime, I like to do a little bit of snowboarding. I also like to build igloos around my house. My father can attest to that. Essentially, I strive to be like the dog on the left-hand side, where I'm more mindful instead of my mind being full of things. It's more about being self-aware about what's going on. So on the left-hand side, that's one of my cats, Jerry. Thinks he's a parrot at times. The one on the right there is Jinx, a cockatiel. I was bird watching for a friend. I don't have a picture of my other cat, Cheez-It. I just didn't have enough time. So some of my favorite authors are going to be people like Henry David Thoreau, Imam Ali. We're looking at Aldo Leopold, Aldous Huxley, Aristotle, and the likes. One thing I've really, really learned, and that's really stuck with me, is that perception is reality. And there are also many perspectives when we take a look at this issue. If you're looking at it from the perspective of the whales over there, it's a whole different story. If you're looking at it from the perspective of the humans, it's a whole different story. I've always had a passion for animals. I know there's a story when I was about 3.5 years old, walking around in the concrete jungle that is Queens, New York, where I'm actually from and born. We found a dead bird on the floor, and I was so distraught that I couldn't move on. We had to actually bury it underneath a rock garden. On the right over there, that's just an albino squirrel on the St. Paul campus of the U of M. He posed for me, so I decided why not oblige and take a picture. So a couple of years ago, probably around 5 years ago or so, my whole family actually moved down to Florida, kind of to get a new beginning, just to see what we can do, kind of progress ourselves in life. So while I was at the Florida Institute of Animal Arts, learning about how to make cat burritos, which is very, very relevant to vet techs, I got my I graduated, I got my vet tech degree, and I met a man by the name of Todd Drever. So Todd Drever is a mentor and now personal friend. He said one thing to me that really stuck with me. These animals are exactly the same as you and me. They're just arranged a little differently. If you look at a snake's skin, it's keratin. If you look at our hair, it's keratin. If you look at our nails, they're keratin. So we are the exact same thing as them. They're just arranged just a little differently than we are. He also saw something in me that I guess no one had really seen before, not even myself. He said I had this innate ability to just work with any animal, and I had the passion to do that and to educate others about it. The picture on the right there is me doing a live alligator feeding show. That crazy man on the left over there with all those alligators about to go after him is my mentor, Todd Drever, over there. On the left over there is one of the wolves that I got to work with, F1 hybrid, Moon. On the right over there is Boris, one of the black bears that I got to work with. Natasha was actually next door. On the left over there is me doing an alligator show. So we did wildlife shows where we educated the public about the critters that were seen in Florida. So I'm just kind of showing where the ears of the alligator over there. And then the gentleman to the right over there with sheer fright on his face is my father holding a Chilean roar's hair tarantula. So that left picture, once again, is me and Todd. That's one of the rock python mixes that we used for our educational shows. And then on the right there is a rescue bird that we got, one-legged parrot. Always used to call himself Pretty Bird Gordon. This is one of my favorite places to actually hang out. It's Blue Springs Park. It's lots of blue-green water, manatees, and lots of fish. So while I was down in Florida, I found that red spot right there, my purpose in life, what I wanted to do. And it also continued developing my leadership skills. So over there. I also drove a little bit deeper into my faith to see what it said about environmental stewardship. One of my favorite quotes right now is, "Throw me to the wolves and I'll return leading the pack." So I came back to Minnesota. I started at the U of M. And I met one of my heroes, Jeff Corwin, which is on the right over there. I also learned about things like the logical herdsman, progress traps, and of course on the left-hand side, irony. Sustainability is a huge key thing for me. For me, it's a sweet spot between social, economic, and environmental justice. Essentially, if you look at it, it's kind of a three-legged stool analogy, you can say, or three parts of a circle that kind of all feed in together. All three of them are part of the solution and the problem. So while I was at the U of M, I got to meet Julia Nurborn, who's one of my professors, a mentor, and a great friend of mine now. She is the head of the Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. I began interning down there, and I will be working with them after Memorial Day. What the pictures are here is just a press conference that we did back in April. These over here are some of the mosques that I'm actually working with. The Anjuman al-Asghari is going to be in Osseo, and IHIC is in Brooklyn Center. We're doing free energy audits. We're looking at possibly putting up some solar panels. We're also looking at doing some rain gardens and some community gardens over there. A couple of things that really interest me are eco-friendly design, which is that left over there. I mean, how many of you guys would love to do that over in Lake Calhoun or some of the lakes around here? Bioluminescence, which is that right picture over there. And then I don't know if you guys know about the Keep It Public campaign to try and keep public lands out of private companies' hands. I also am really, really interested in things called biomimicry. So I'll be graduating here in about a week or so. What next? What are my future goals? What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to continue working with MNIPL and what I'm doing right now, reaching out to the different Muslim communities. I'm also going to continue my passion of photography. These are some of the pictures actually I took just not too far away from my house, less than a mile away. And last but not least, this picture sums up how I feel right now. So I am extending my hand out to you guys on this journey. And I hope that you guys will extend your hands out and grab mine and continue along this journey with me. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mohammed. Now I'm going to hand it back over to Kristen.
Thanks, Taylor. Switch things up. All right. Well, thank you so much. I lost my panel. They were over here and now they're there. Thanks so much, Andy and Anna and Mohammed, for sharing your stories here this evening. I love the spectrum of solutions. We talked about mitigation of climate change. We talked about adaptation. And we talked about the importance of just education, which, as a director of education, of course, I really firmly believe is important as well. I also love how different you all are. Obviously, Andy is a climate scientist, but let's face it, we all can't be scientists. But we certainly can all engage in solutions, as Anna very eloquently explained to all of us this evening. I'll tell you that I've felt fairly paralyzed by this issue throughout my life, and it's actually a hazard of, I guess, the career that I'm in. But being involved in the planning of this convening, as well as the other 11 convenings, hearing stories, they're all different. Every community has different stories to tell. And meeting community members like you all that are actually here to hear about this issue and learn about what to do, I've never felt so hopeful about the future. So thank you so much for being here this evening to be a part of this. At this point, we wanted to take the opportunity to check back in with you and ask you a last and final question. And so go ahead and pull those sheets of paper out again. And on the back, you will find a spectrum of smiles. Hopefully this isn't something you've had to use before in the ER or anything, but it may be familiar to you. But we want to ask you this evening that after hearing from your neighbors, after hearing from our speakers, how do you feel now about tackling climate change? And there's no right answer to this. We're just interested in finding that out. Go ahead and color it in or circle it or make a cartoon stick figure out of it, however you want to do that. And then once you've done that, go ahead and put that underneath your chair so you don't forget it and bring it with you, because we want to keep those. So I'll give you a second to think about that. All right. Well, I hope a lot of you circled ones near one end of the spectrum that's a little bit smilier, because now is the time for us to actually get down to work and do something. We really appreciate you sticking with us through this evening, through the ups and downs. I always feel this sort of collective sigh after our science speaker. It's really important information we all need to hear, but it can be pretty disconcerting. I love, like I said, we featured some really great solutions, and we have some other great ones to offer to you all now. It's your turn now to decide what you're going to do next and how you're going to work together with some folk, the rest of the people that are here this evening, to help shape the future of your community. So we have 5 different solutions to offer. And if you have an agenda in front of you, if you want to flip that over, they're described in depth a little bit more in depth on the back. But they're all very different, and you're all very different people with different concerns and different interests, and I hope that one of them really resonates with you and you say, this is something I really want to learn more about. There's a climate storytelling workshop that's offered by Climate Generation and Will Steger Legacy. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and Dakota Valley Recycling are doing a session on food waste and composting. The Dakota Electric will be offering a workshop on energy solutions. Metro Blooms will be doing something on native plantings for a resilient landscape, and Valley Natural Foods will do a session on environmental impact of choosing locally grown food. So these workshops will last about 30 minutes. I really encourage you to stay for them. They're going to be spectacular, and we've got some great people that are offering them. And there's some freebies that come out of some of them too, if that's an instigator for you to get to some of them. I won't tell you which one, so you have to just go choose one. But before I send you off to follow the color-coded sign that's in the back of the room, so you'll see some color-coded signs that actually match the color of the solution that you're interested in. I wanted to ask you to just sit for a moment and look around the room at all the different people that are here with us this evening that have decided to come here this evening to commit to learning about climate change and to start thinking about how to engage in solutions, and really celebrate the magnitude of that, because together we can do something, we can make an impact, and we hope that you're leaving this with that sense and that feeling. Then I want you to imagine there's 11 more of these that are happening around the state of Minnesota, in all corners of Minnesota. And in each of them, there's groups, there's communities coming together, and they're doing the same thing, and they're committing to doing something about this. And feel that sense that together, we bring all our communities together, we can actually do something for our state and for our planet. And that's a pretty big deal. And so thank you for being here this evening. So with that, please decide on what workshop that you are planning on attending. Like I said, the signs are in the back. I believe there's also food in the campus cup, so don't be shy about stopping by there on the way out to get something to eat. And thank you very much for joining us here this evening. So look for your colored sign. Some lovely ladies in the back there holding them up for you to follow. Huh? Hi. Kurt.
Come to Designer Marketplace, the Twin Cities' best-kept secret, and you'll think...